Okay, Francis, over to you.
Hello, friends. Welcome to this 64th webinar on the Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. This webinar series is available on makara.us under the subheading Moria Federation Webinars, then Webinar Series in Progress. Previous episodes of this, The Secret Doctrine, and the Treatise on Cosmic Fire series are also available on YouTube. Just do a search for Francis Donald and the webinar you wish to view. You can join any of these webinars on the homepage of moriafederation.com. Okay, this will be our 7th webinar on the chapter entitled The Zodiac and Its Signs. I think we're going to be finishing up next time. We're almost make it to the end this time, but I don't think quite, but definitely next time. We began our last session by taking a look at the scorpion, snake, and eagle, the 3 progressive symbols of Scorpio, representing different stages of becoming on the path of return. MPH points out that the scorpion is in depictions of Mithras. You can see it down here. In Mithras' tauroctony, which just means ritual slaughter of the bull, represents the influence of Scorpio, the sign opposite Taurus on the fixed cross. MPH then notes that Leo is associated with the quote-unquote sun's shaggy mane because it is a sign that follows the sign in which the summer equinox occurs. We then learned about the Nemean lion conquered by Hercules, a Leonian association which in DK's teaching represents mastery of the personality, at which time the disciple becomes the Lion of Judah. Leo is also believed to be the sign in which the quote-unquote birth of the world took place. Here's a chart derived from the ancients that is considered to be the birth chart of the world, in which the planetary rulers of the signs, including the sun in Leo, were believed to be in the 15th degree of their respective signs. The chart is, of course, symbolic because it could never actually occur, if for no other reason than the fact that Mercury is never more than 28 degrees from the sun, here shown at 30 degrees from the sun, and Venus is never more than 47 degrees from the sun, here shown at 60 degrees from the sun. Nonetheless, its aspects are philosophically relevant, revealing much about the constraints of manifestation or the conditions that need to be present for manifestation to happen. For example, the moon in Pisces conjunct the ascendant suggests the human kingdom's descent into the realm of form, with its opposition to Saturn in Aquarius suggesting that it will be ruled by the law of karma.
Francis?
Yeah.
You're not saying the signs. You're saying the moon is in Cancer and Saturn is in Capricorn in this chart.
Yeah, did I say moon in Cancer?
You said moon in Pisces. But, okay.
Oh, did I say Pisces? Yeah, I'm sorry. I misspoke. Yes, moon in Pisces. Of course, that's relevant because, moon in Cancer is relevant because Cancer is a sign that where the fourth kingdom, the human kingdom, first incarnates. So it becomes particularly relevant. I just misspoke. Actually, Pisces is the first sign in which each individual human being incarnates, according to esoteric astrology. But Cancer is the incarnation of the human kingdom, so it is particularly relevant that it would be conjunct the moon, that the ascendant would be conjunct the moon in Cancer, which is opposite Capricorn, with Saturn in Capricorn, which of course rules Capricorn and is the great lord of karma. Okay, thanks for that, BL. I wonder where I got that from. Okay. MPH then notes that at some point after entering the Aquarian age, the secret religions of the world will once again include the raising to initiation, the teaching an exact alignment with DK's prophecies concerning the New World religion through which the first initiation will become a public event. We then took a look at the illustration at the center of page 55 of the folio edition, which depicts the circular zodiac of Dindara, where MPH notes the signs of the zodiac form an inward spiral, beginning with Leo and ending with Cancer. This zodiac, which forms just a small but central part of the frieze, has some interesting features, such as the figure representing Virgo holding the tail of the Leonian lion, which is a possible acknowledgement of the fact that Leo and Virgo were once one sign. Also note that the snake that the Leo is standing on, that Leo the lion is standing on, seems to form the leading edge of the spiral that by which all the signs conform. Next, we explored the antiquity of the zodiac, citing examples from Babylon and ancient India, but noting that these tablets and papyri are just surviving copies of much earlier sources brought from Atlantis by the progenitors of the Aryan root race. MPH then puts forward the theosophical idea concerning the antiquity of the human race, noting that, quote, modern science counts its age in tens of thousands of years, occultism in tens of millions. The Master DK places individualization at 21 million years ago, but this only takes us back to the middle of the third root race. Humanity itself began developing in the previous solar system, hundreds of trillions of years ago. And even in this solar system, you're looking at root races on previous rounds, on previous globes that were billions of years ago. MPH then notes that the ancients believed in hylozoism, a philosophical doctrine that suggests all matter is alive, and that through the law of cyclicity or reincarnation, all sentient life passes upward through the kingdoms of nature, eventually becoming human beings on their way to even higher expressions of life. The belief system most aligned with this evolutionary process described by MPH is Theosophy. But the ancient Hindus, Buddhists, Gnostics, and Neoplatonists all believed in some form of evolutionary path made possible through reincarnation, though these disciplines vary significantly in the details of this process. Some believing in transmigration that allows you to be born as an animal after you've been a human being, which is not a a concept held by theosophists. Anyway, that pretty much takes us up to where we left off last time. So next up in the text, the houses of the zodiac become the thrones for 12 celestial hierarchies, or as certain of the ancients state, 10 divine orders. So MPH here implies that each house of the zodiac is governed or influenced by a specific celestial hierarchy or divine order that oversees the different aspects of life represented by that house, thus making each house a domain or throne for a particular hierarchy of celestial beings. But in fact, the 12 houses and the 10 divine orders are not directly related. The 12 houses provide a framework for understanding different areas of life experience, whereas the 10 divine orders put forth by Pythagoras and Plato outlined a hierarchical structure of spiritual and cosmic reality. In fact, we're going to take a look at that now. Pythagoras taught that 10, or the unit of the decimal system, was the most perfect of all numbers. And he symbolized the number 10 by the lesser tetractys, an arrangement of 10 dots in the form of an upright triangle. So let's take a closer look at Pythagoras' 10 divine orders. And you can see how they're actually quite different than the idea of houses. Can we get a reader, please?
I'll start us off. 1, the monad, unity, the source of all things. 2, the dyad, duality, representing balance and opposition. 3, the triad, harmony, the interaction of unity and duality. 4, the tetrad, the four elements and the structure of the physical world. 5, the pentad, life and health, symbolizing the human microcosm. 6, the hexad, order and structure, often linked to the harmony of the spheres. 7, the heptad, spiritual and mysticism, associated with the 7 classical planets. 8, the ogdoad, cosmic balance and justice. 9, ennead, completion and fulfillment, often linked to the 9 celestial bodies. And 10, the decad, perfection and the return to unity, symbolizing the entire cosmos.
Thanks, PL. Of course, this is just an introductory overview. There's much, much more that can be said about the 10 aspects of the tetractys. Okay, and I want to invite you all to participate today. Anybody who has any ideas or questions, please speak up. Next up, could we get a reader, please?
Yes, Scott, can you read that for us, please?
Okay. The early stargazers, after dividing the zodiac into its houses, appointed the 3 brightest stars in each constellation to be the joint rulers of that house. Then they divided the house into 3 sections of 10 degrees each, which they called decans. These, in turn, were divided in half, resulting in the breaking up of the zodiac into 72 duodecans of 5 degrees each. Over each of these duodecans, the Hebrews placed a celestial intelligence, or angel, and from this system has resulted the Kabbalistic arrangement of the 72 sacred names, which correspond to the 72 flowers, knops, and almonds upon the 7-branched candlestick of the tabernacle, and the 72 men who were chosen from the 12 tribes to represent Israel. Only two signs not already mentioned, the only two signs not already mentioned, are Gemini and Sagittarius. The constellation of Gemini is generally represented as two small children, who, according to the ancients, were born out of eggs, possibly the ones that the bull broke with his horns. And the stories concerning Castor and Pollux and Romulus and Remus may be the result of amplifying the myths of these celestial twins. The symbols of Gemini have passed through many modifications. The one used by the Arabians was the peacock. Two of the important stars in the constellation of Gemini still bear the names of Castor and Pollux. The sign of Gemini is supposed to have been the patron of phallic worship, and the two obelisks or pillars in front of temples and churches convey the same symbolism as the twins.
Thank you, Scott.
That's a new one.
So, first, the early stargazers, after dividing the zodiac into its houses, appointed the 3 brightest stars in each constellation to be the joint ruler of that house. So this should probably read the joint rulers of that sign, not of that house. But MPH often conflates the two. There is an association between sign and house. For example, Aries rules the first house, Taurus the second, etc. But star rulership is more associated with the signs. For example, Regulus, Denebola, and Algeba rule Leo. They're the 3 brightest stars in that sign. So you have the alpha, beta, and gamma stars representing those 3 stars. And they're often significant stars in a sign. But as far as I know, there's no associations between stars and houses. Do any of the astrologers here, Biel or Scott or anybody else, know of such an association? I couldn't find anything like that.
I don't know of any.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know of any. But I did, I have something, excuse me, from Nicholas, and he was discussing it with Michael. And what he did was he took the decanates for each of the signs and he assigned constellations to them. Now, that isn't the houses, but we all know that in traditional astrology, the houses have a correlation to the signs. So there may be something to that, but it was all speculative. It was just, work they were talking about. And of course, Nicholas does some wonderful things with the constellations. And so that's one of his specialties, that he does that.
Yeah, actually, Michael developed that quite a bit in his webinars on esoteric astrology. He often devotes an entire webinar within a sign on the decanate, their rulers, and develops the theme of the constellations. And they often, to me, make sense. The themes that he develops. For instance, a decadent, a constellation associated with the first decadent of a sign will represent an initial phase in a disciple's process, and the third constellational ruler. These are all extra zodiacal constellations, of course, will represent, like a culminating process of becoming within that sign. So yeah, they often make sense. Sometimes they don't, and he couldn't make sense of them either. But yeah, he made quite an effort to develop this idea that Nicholas and he uh, worked on. Anyway,
Francis, just to let you know, I just put in the link to the chat to everybody for Michael Robbins' Esoteric Astrology Adventures. The webinars are
great.
there if anybody wants to tackle that.
Yeah, great. I can't recommend them enough. Uh, they're just terrific. Okay, they go about 2 to 3 pages of esoteric astrology per webinar, and the webinars last anywhere from an hour to 2 hours as a rule. So it's quite it's he's meticulous in his study of the material. Okay, next up, then they divide the house into 3 sections of 10 degrees each. Here we are now talking about what we at BL just mentioned, which they call decans. These in turn were divided in half, resulting in the breaking up of the zodiac into 72 duodecans of 5 degrees each. So here's a zodiacal chart with each sign divided into 3 decanates, making 36 decanates in all. The system of rulership shown here uses the Chaldean order, wherein the rulers of the decanates follow the order of the visible planets based on their geocentric speeds. It goes from Saturn, Jupiter, Mars, Sun, Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. Much more commonly, astrologers use the triplicity system, which is actually best described by example. For instance, using the triplicity system, the first decanate of Aries, 0 to 9 degrees, is ruled by Mars, the exoteric ruler of Aries. The second decanate is ruled by the planet that rules the next sign within the same element. For Aries, which is a fire sign, the next fire sign is Leo, ruled by the sun. Therefore, the second decan of Aries is ruled by the sun. The third decadent is ruled by the exoteric ruler of the third sign within the same element. For Aries, the next fire sign after Leo is Sagittarius, exoterically ruled by Jupiter. So here's a hand-drawn chart that I found online that shows the Chaldean system on the outer ring and the triplicity system on the inner ring. To get the duo. Oh, and by the way, the other thing about the triplicity system that's so great is that if you know the exoteric rulers of the 12 signs, you can figure out all the decadent rulers because you just go to the second and third ruler of the element of the sign that you're trying to figure out. It sounds complicated at first, but it's actually not that difficult to figure out. To get the duodecadent system described in the text, one must further divide each decadent into 2 parts, giving a total of 72 zodiacal segments. Another system assigns extra zodiacal constellations to the 3 decadents. That's what BL and I were just talking about, which in combination with the decadents, planetary rulers can provide useful insights. So you look not only, for instance, with Aries, you're not only looking at the planetary ruler of each sign. This just shows the signs. You'd have to translate this into the planets of these signs. I couldn't find a chart that showed the planets that rule the decadents and the constellations, but it's quickly translated. For instance, Perseus rules the final decadent of Aries, it's associated with Saturn, and a case can be made for this being representing a high stage of development within the Aries pantheon.
Francis,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say it would be interesting to look at this in relation to that first chart that you showed with uh, the Earth, with the Cancer ascendant and everything at 15 degrees,
Oh, right.
because they would all be in the second decadent. So, um, this in relation to that, if
Yeah.
for instance, for Cancer, it puts Scorpio as the decadent that they're in. For Leo, it puts Sagittarius. For
Right.
Virgo, Capricorn,
Yeah.
Libra, Aquarius, and for Scorpio, Pisces. So, I mean, it gives it a whole different, um, the decadent never negates the original sign, the original rulers. What it does is it adds depth.
That's right. Absolutely. It's really a fascinating study. You might think, oh, geez, it's already so complex. Why would why would I want to do this? It actually will shed light on your understanding of the signs and the energies of the rulers. Right. So it's a fascinating process, especially when you take in the significance of the esoteric rulers of the signs as well. So the combination of the constellations and the three, the exoteric, esoteric, and hierarchical rulers of each signs, and the decadents and decadent rulers all together give a much more complete picture of the energy of the signs. Okay, next up. Over each of these duodecans, the Hebrews placed a celestial intelligence or angel. And from this system has resulted the Kabbalistic arrangement of the 72 sacred names, which correspond to the 72 flowers, knops, and almonds on the 7-branched candlestick of the tabernacle, which is also called the menorah, and the 72 men who were chosen from the 12 tribes to represent Israel. As far as I could find, and again, astrologers, correct me if I'm wrong, the 72 duodecanates are not much used in traditional or esoteric astrology, but they do represent an important aspect of Kabbalistic teaching. The 72 angels, which are named here, you can see them, are derived from the Shem HaMeforash, which means the explicit name of God. This name is composed of 72, now here they are in Hebrew, 72 3-letter names, each associated with an angel, which was originally derived from, and this is really out there, from 3 consecutive verses in the book of Exodus, each verse of which contains 72 letters. And I got into how they actually extract the names of these angels from these 3 verses from the 72 letters. So if you, like I say, each of these has 72 letters. And since there are 3 letters in each name, you have exactly the number of letters in these 3 verses as you do total letters in the 72 names of the angels. And they have a mathematical system of deriving these names. Quite complex. Here's a chart showing the zodiacal signs on the outer wheel, the decadent rulers on the next wheel, and the number and names in Hebrew here of the 72 angels on the next 2 wheels, each associated with a duo or half decadent. And as I said, this is the only place I've ever seen duodecanots used, or where it's indicated that there's any particular significance. But, if you can, I didn't do this, but if you, found a source of information that describes the qualities of these various angels, then you might be able to associate those qualities with the decanates that they're associated with, and therefore with the signs that they're associated with. You would have 6 angels per sign, and 2 per decanate for each sign. And there might be an interesting association between the quality or nature of the angels and the signs. As stated in the text, these names also correspond to the 72 flowers, knops, or buds and almonds upon the 7-branched menorah. So each flower, bud, and almond indicating some aspect of each of the 72 angels. You would never guess it if you saw a menorah that it would have such precise significance, but evidently such is the case, that their placement, which one of the branches, where, how far out on these branches, all indicates the quality and nature of these angels. It's pretty fascinating. The quote, 72 men chosen from the 12, chosen from the 12 tribes to represent Israel, refers to the 72 elders chosen by Moses to assist him in leading the Israelites, as described in the book of Numbers. These men were selected from the 12 tribes of Israel, symbolizing a complete and representative leadership. In Kabbalistic thought, the fact that there are 72 angels and 72 elders represents a link between the divine and the earthly, the spiritual. And see what I got in chat.
Francis, I have a link. Are you there, Francis? Did we lose you? Can anybody hear me, or can anybody hear Francis?
I can hear you, but I can't hear Francis.
That's
Okay,
right.
we
I can
lost
hear you and
Francis.
not Francis.
I can hear you, but no Francis.
We lost you, Francis. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a link in the chat to a PDF version of something called the Dictionary of Angels, including the Fallen Angels by Gustav Davidson. If anybody's interested in pursuing that avenue, let me see if it'll work. Nope.
Well, you can always copy paste it.
Okay, all right, so good, we got you back. We lost you there for a minute.
Yep, I literally got knocked out of the webinar and then it automatically rebooted. This has been happening all morning. I don't know what's going on around here, but something.
There we go. Let me see. Let me see if I can put that in really quick, and then
Sure.
I used it. I did a presentation on angels last conference, and
That's right. I remember.
and it was a really wonderful source, and it talked about a lot of the stuff that you're talking about. And it gave the glyphs, and of course I loved the glyphs and the
Yeah,
it was just wonderful. So anyway, I put that in there, and sorry, I didn't mean to take over your
I don't mind. It's fine.
go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
It's all on subject, so that's good. Yeah, I think this could be a very fruitful certainly it would be a very deep study to become familiar with these 72 angels. And, who knows how much information. I guess, BL, you actually looked into it, huh? And found some information on some of these angels. Huh?
I I had to limit it, of course, and I was concentrating on um, the seven archangels, and my presentation was called "The Angels of Aquarius." Um, so I tried to link it to that, and I did that through the decans, and but it was just fascinating to see those. And then, of course, I used the Jafra images, which have so much of the symbolism in them. And what I found that was so fascinating was the glyphs that you find in that Angel's Dictionary are all over the place in the Jafra images. So for each
Yeah,
sign.
I've run across that. I explored one Jofra image and all those glyphs and tracked them down as much as I could. And I was uh, amazed and fascinated that uh, the information that came as a result of doing that. So cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have somebody speaking. Can you deal with that, Bill?
Brendan, did you want to say something? You're
No, I think I just
okay, then
pressed. I'm on my
I'm gonna
cell
mute
phone.
I'm gonna mute you again.
All right. So next up, the only two signs not already mentioned are Gemini and Sagittarius. The constellation of Gemini is generally represented as two small children who, according to the ancients, were born out of eggs, possibly the ones that the bull broke with his horns. So, according to Greek mythology, Leda was seduced by Zeus. This is the exoteric version, of course, who came to her in the form of a swan. She then laid two eggs. Castor and Pollux were born from one egg, Helen from the other, as shown in this illustration. Here's the twins down here and Helen over here, I think. Now, esoterically, Zeus as swan represents the Hindu Kalahamsa, the swan of time, which is associated with Brahma and the third aspect. The mundane egg laid by Kalahamsa represents the abstract potential for all manifestation, the primordial duality of spirit and matter symbolized by the Geminian twins. Next, the stories concerning Castor and Pollux and Romulus and Remus may be the result of amplifying the myths of these celestial twins. So the Roman Romulus and Remus, born of Rhea Silvia and Cytherae Mars, are, in my opinion, a lower octave of the Greek Castor and Pollux, born of Zeus, who is second-rate Jupiter, and Leda or Kalahamsa. Both pairs highlight the strong bond between brothers, but whereas Castor and Pollux bond is harmonious and sacrificial, Romulus and Remus's relationship is marked by rivalry and conflict. Next, the symbols of Gemini have passed through many modifications. The one used by the Arabians was the peacock. Different metaphor, same theme. The peacock's life cycle, particularly its molting process, symbolizes spiritual growth and renewal. Shedding old feathers to grow new ones represents letting go of past patterns and embracing new beginnings, which is also descriptive of the journey from Castor to Pollux. Early Christian art featured peacocks as symbols of resurrection and the everlasting nature of the soul. Finally, two of the important stars in the constellation of Gemini still bear the names of Castor and Pollux. The sign of Gemini is supposed to have been the patron of phallic worship, and the two obelisks or pillars in front of temples and churches convey the same symbolism as the twins. So we see Castor and Pollux in the upper left of the constellation, representing the two brightest stars in Gemini. The Masonic pillars, Boaz and Jachin, represent the duality of Castor and Pollux seen from a different angle. Could we get a reader for this short passage?
And Veronica, can you read that for us, please? Can you hear me? Okay. Ariane, can you read that
I'm
for us,
here,
please?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Anne Veronica.
Sorry, it just wouldn't open my mic. The columns of Solomon's temple, Jess, Shin, and Boaz, are the emblems of the androgyne. They are also respectively male and female, white and black, square and round. The male a unity, the female a binary. In the later Kabbalistic treatise, the active principle is pictured by the sword, the passive by the sheath.
Sorry, I was muted. That's Isis Unveiled. I didn't get a page number for that. Okay. In order to round out the teaching on Gemini, let's take a look at this passage from Esoteric Astrology. Can we get a reader, please?
Yes. Ariane, can you read that, please?
Yes, thank you. Apart from the importance of the influences of Gemini as the dominant power in the mutable cross, it is one of the paramount zodiacal signs, and that it is the major symbol of duality in the zodiac. It is the constellation Gemini, and its inherent second-ray influence, which control every one of the pairs of opposites in the great wheel. Gemini, therefore, forms with each of the pairs of opposites in the zodiac a third factor, powerfully influencing the other two constellations, and thus forms with them certain great zodiacal triangles. These only become of importance when considering the horoscopes of advanced human beings or esoteric groups. But eventually, when casting the horoscope of a disciple or an initiate, the esoteric astrologer will have to consider their potency. For instance, in the case of an initiate whose sun is in Leo, the triangle of constellation energies determining the interpretation of the horoscope would be Leo, Aquarius, Gemini. When dealing with a subject whose sun is in Gemini itself, the conditioning triangle would be Gemini, Sagittarius, Pisces, the latter forming a part of this triangle because it marks both the end and the beginning, and is, for this great cycle of the zodiac, the Alpha and the Omega.
Thank you, Ariane. Any thoughts or questions about this? It's not just a description of Gemini. It's, this idea that Gemini forms the third sign in 10 of the constellational pairs. Everyone except for the Gemini-Sag pairing is, I think, an important consideration. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Nadel, can you read that for us, please?
The sign of Sagittarius consists of what the ancient Greeks called a centaur, a composite creature, the lower half of whose body was in the form of a horse, while the upper half was human. The centaur is generally shown with a bow and arrow in his hands, aiming a shaft far off into the stars. Hence, Sagittarius stands for two distinct principles. First, it represents the spiritual evolution of man, for the human form is rising from the body of the beast. Secondly, it is the symbol of aspiration and ambition, for as the centaur aims his arrow at the stars, so every human creature aims at a higher mark than he can reach. Albert Churchward, in The Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man, sums up the influence of the zodiac upon religious symbolism in the following words. The division here is in 12 parts, the 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 gates of heaven mentioned in Revelation, and 12 entrances or portals to be passed through in the Great Pyramid before finally reaching the highest degree, and 12 apostles in the Christian doctrines, and the 12 original and perfect points in Masonry.
Thank you. Okay, first, the sign of Sagittarius consists of what the ancient Greeks called a centaur, a composite creature, the lower half of whose body was in the form of a horse, while the upper half was human. The centaur is generally shown with a bow and arrow in his hands, aiming a shaft far off into the stars. So could I get a reader, please, for this passage from Esoteric Astrology on Sagittarius?
Marguerite, can you read that for us, please?
Sure. Sagittarius is sometimes depicted as an archer on a white horse, and a study of the meaning of this symbolism will reveal a great deal of inner teaching. This is one of the later ways of portraying this constellation. Earlier in Atlantean days, from which period we have inherited what we know about astrology, the sign was frequently depicted by the centaur, the fabulous animal which was half a man and half a horse. The horse symbolism dominated Atlantean myths and symbols, just as the ram and the lamb are predominantly to be found in our modern presentations. This earlier sign of the centaur stood for the evolution and the development of the human soul, with its human objectives, its selfishness, its identification with form, its desire, and its aspirations. The archer on the white horse, which is the more strictly Aryan symbol for this sign, signifies the orientation of the man towards a definite goal. The man is then not part of the horse, but is freed from identification with it and is the controlling factor. The definite goal of the centaur, which is the satisfaction of desire and animal incentives, becomes in the latter stages the goal of initiation, which meets with satisfaction in Capricorn after the preliminary work has been done in Sagittarius. The keynote of the centaur is ambition. The keynote of the archer is aspiration and direction, and both are expressions of human goals, but one is of the personality and the other of the soul. From ambition to aspiration, from selfishness to an intense desire for selflessness, from individual one-pointed self-interest in Leo to the one-pointedness of the disciple in Sagittarius, and thence to initiation in Capricorn.
Thank you, Marguerite. And another reader is start up here in the upper left.
Sam, can you read that forth, please?
Yep, sure. Attached or fused to duality, the centaur. Unattached to duality, the archer. Freedom at one-pointedness, the bow and the arrow, Esoteric Astrology 177. It's interesting to note that astrological symbol of this sign currently used is simply the arrow with a fragment of the bow depicted. Archer as well as the centaur have dropped out of the picture. And this is largely because the emphasis of focus on human living today is not based upon the objective outer facts of life, upon the physical plane, but upon some form of inner focus or emphasis, which varies from the many stages of astral and emotional ambition to spiritual aspiration, and from the activities of the lower mind bent upon selfish interest to the illumination of the same mind through the focus upon the soul, as ancient the catechism, which all disciples have to master, asks the following questions and supplies the needed answers. Where is the animal, or Lano, and where the man? Fused into one, O master of my life, the two are one, but both have disappeared and not remained but the deep fire of my desire. Where is the horse, the white horse of the soul? Where is the rider of that horse, O Lano? Gone towards the gate, O master of my life, but something speeds ahead between the pillars of an open door and something that I myself have loosed. And what remains of thee, O wise Lano, now that the horses of two kinds have left thee and the rider unattached stand free? Now what remains? Not but my bow and arrow, O master of my life, but they suffice. And when the right time comes, I, thy Lano, will follow the fast upon the shaft I sent. The horses I have leave upon this door, side of the door. From them I have no further need. I enter free, regain the arrow, with which I sent and speed upon my way, passing from door to door, and each time the arrow speeds ahead. Esoteric Astrology 175 to 177.
Thank you, Sam. So there's actually a dual way of interpreting, for instance, the white horse and this whole process of moving through the symbolism of Sagittarius. And this passage from the old commentary shows the higher meaning of the white horse. You know, the sort of traditionally the white horse represents the purified personality who is then capable of carrying the rider towards the soul. But at a later stage, the white horse represents the soul. And then the rider is gone towards the gate of the monad. Between the final pillars of the pairs of opposites, which are represented by Abhambuddhi Manas. So I wanted to point that out. Next. Any thoughts or questions about this, by the way? Anybody wonder? Right. Hence, Sagittarius stands for two distinct principles. First, it represents the spiritual evolution of man, for the human form is rising from the body of the beast. Secondly, it is the symbol of aspiration and ambition. For as the centaur aims his arrow at the stars, so every human creature aims at a higher mark than he can reach. Regarding the earlier stage, Sagittarius governs a critical part of human evolution. As the sun was in that sign when the hierarchy began its approach in order to stimulate the forms of life upon our planet. As to the later stage, DK tells us that Sagittarius eventually becomes the sign of the one-pointed disciple. Quote, the life of fluid response to matter becomes that of the focused response to spirit and preparation for initiation in Capricorn. Okay, next up, Albert Churchward in The Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man sums up the influence of the zodiac upon religious symbolism in the following words. The division here is in 12 parts. The 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 gates of heaven mentioned in Revelation, and 12 entrances or portals to be passed through in the Great Pyramid before finally reaching the highest degree, and 12 apostles in the Christian doctrines, and the 12 original and perfect points in Masonry. So here's Churchward's signs of the symbols of primordial man, which in this passage emphasizes the appearance of the number 12. 12 represents completeness, divine order, and cosmic harmony. Churchward's work is both scholarly and beautifully illustrated. For example, here he describes certain circular druidic temples, each with 12 pillars, and describes their meaning. Several other authors, including the Zohar, link the 12 tribes of Israel with the 12 signs of the zodiac, as shown here. We're not going to read this, but you can see there's a definite correlation. Here's Judah, represented before in one of the labors of Hercules, where he starts by conquering by the Nemean lion, which is the lion of personality, so that he might himself become the Lion of Judah, right? In the book of Revelation, New Jerusalem is described as having 12 gates, each inscribed with the name of one of the 12 tribes of Israel, esoterically representing the 12 signs of the zodiac. For insight on the, quote, 12 entrances or portals to be passed through the Great Pyramid before finally reaching the highest degree, let's take a look at this passage from The Signs and Symbols of Primordial Man. Can we get a reader, please?
Ben, can you read that for us, please?
We contend that the Great Pyramid of Giza was built in Egypt as a monument and lasting memorial of this early religion on true scientific laws by divine inspiration and knowledge of the laws of the universe. Indeed, we may look on the Great Pyramid as the first true Masonic temple in the world, surpassing all others that have ever been built, and their secrets depicted on stone symbolically to be read by those who have been initiated into the secret mysteries of their religion after having passed through the various degrees. For it was only men, theopnostics or pnoistics, of the greatest honor and integrity who could possibly hope to attain to the highest or most sublime degree. And then, only after long and patient study and many trials had been done through to attain that been gone through to attain that end. Here in stone is set forth the passage of the Duat and Amenta.
Thank you. And another reader, please.
Barbara, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. The 12 divisions of the Tuat, the original, were the 12 signs of the zodiac, worked out by the Astro-Egyptian mythologists during their mythos. Then they converted their mythology into eschatology, which must have taken many years. We find they had, so to speak, dug out the underworld and had, by divine inspiration or the study of the laws of the celestial bodies, come to the conclusion that after the death of this perishable body, the soul, which is imperishable, had to travel through many dangers and difficulties before it could be received again by its divine creator. This the Egyptians depict most graphically, and the records are still extant in the book of, quote, that which is in the underworld, unquote, which they have divided into 12 divisions in, quote, the Tuat and the 12 hours of the night, unquote, which is hewn in stone in the Great Pyramid of Giza. The signs and symbols of primordial man, pages 22 to 23.
Thank you, Barbara. So eschatology is the study of the death, judgment, and final destiny of the soul. The Tuat, which is the Egyptian underworld, being quote unquote hewn in stone, means that the 12 initiations called the 12 hours of the night are symbolically represented by the dimensions and proportions of the Great Pyramid. There's not 12 doors in the Great Pyramid to pass through, but the symbolic dimensions indicate this these 12 hours of the night. Finally, the 12 original and perfect points in Masonry are symbolic steps that a candidate must pass through during their initiation. These points are deeply rooted in Masonic tradition and are often linked to the 12 tribes of Israel. You have preparation, entrance, prayer, circumambulation, presentation, obligation, investiture, illumination, instruction, charge, fellowship, and closing. Okay, next up, can we get a reader, please?
Tom, can you read that for us, please?
Yeah, I could read. First, I would like to comment in that way that could it be the way I think that 12 is so crucial in every doctrine is well described in the horoscope in that way that it's not exactly the 12 that is the point, but the point is that the whole is divided in 12 parts, and that's why for one cycle or complete part of the progress to be completed, you have to deal with all those 12 to make a whole. So that's why the 12 is crucial in this.
Yeah, the idea that the unity is the true point of the sacredness of the 12. Interesting about the number 2. You have the 1 and the 2, and added together they represent the 3, or the sum total is 3, and so you have the 3 aspects. That also works philosophically if you think of the first aspect as spirit and the sum total as the form aspect, and then the second principle is that which binds the two. So there's a lot even in the numerology of the number 12.
Yeah, so it's very natural.
Yeah, it is very natural.
Yeah. Okay. The ancients believed that the theory of man's being made in the image of God was to be understood literally. They maintained that the universe was a great organism, not unlike the human body, and that every phase and function of the universal body had a correspondence in man. The most precious key to wisdom that the priests communicated to the new initiates was that they turned the law of analogy. Therefore, to the ancients, the study of the stars was a sacred science, for they saw in the movements of the celestial bodies the ever-present activity of the infinite Father. The Pythagoreans were often undeservedly criticized for promulgating the so-called doctrine of metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls. This concept was, as circulated among the uninitiated, was merely a blind, however, to conceal a sacred truth. Greek mystics believed that the spiritual nature of man descended into material existence from the Milky Way, the seed ground of souls, through one of the 12 gates of this great zodiacal band. The spiritual nature was therefore said to incarnate in the form of the symbolic creature created by magicians, stargazers to present the various zodiacal constellations. In the spirit incarnated through the sign of Aries, it was said to be born in the body of Ram, if in Taurus in the body of the celestial bull.
Thank you, Tom. Okay. So
Francis?
first, yeah.
Sorry. I just want to say that Anne Veronica has put in the chat that exotology is the Greek word, the final frontier. And
Which makes sense. Yeah. Acoustics.
That is a Greek word, and it also means the one that God inspired.
Yeah, and that's also relevant to what was being said at the time. It's described such a one as that. I have to go back to find it, but yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, realize how far. Here's eschatology, which Aunt Veronica.
Well, eschatos in Greek means the final, the furthest, the final frontier. That's the way I could say it in English.
Yeah, that makes sense.
The ending.
Right, and it's a in English it represents the study of death, but in relation to the soul. So you could see how that would be the final frontier, or an example of the final frontier anyway. Thanks for that, Aunt Veronica. Interesting. See, where's that other word, theopeustics? I don't think it's.
I think it was 1 or 2 slides before this one.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah. So, or it was only men, theopeustics of the greatest honor, and so there you have it again. Means the one that God inspired. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
And then Ben adds that eschatology is often translated as the last things.
Okay. Yeah, that fits. Okay, so first up, the ancients believed that the theory of man's being made in the image of God was to be understood literally. They maintained that the universe was a great organism, not unlike the human body, and that every phase and function of the universal body had a correspondence in man. Okay, so that man is made in the image of God is believed to be literally true by traditional Christians and Jews. Theosophy, on the other hand, teaches that the universe, or macrocosm, and the individual human microcosm are reflections of each other, that the structure and functions of the universe are mirrored in a human being. For example, the chakras in a solar logos or planetary logos are the higher correspondences to the chakras in a human being. The tree of life, the Sephiroth of Kabbalism, is also very much oriented to these the significances of what's called the macro prosopis as compared to the micro prosopis, which just means face of man, or face, and it's the greater face and the lesser face, and they're very much related in Kabbalistic theory. Okay, next, the most precious key to wisdom that the priests communicated to the new initiates was what they termed the law of analogy. Therefore, to the ancients, the study of the stars was a sacred science, for they saw in the movements of the celestial bodies the ever-present activity of the infinite Father. The law of analogy, or as above, so below, is also a key tenet of the ageless wisdom. Could we get a reader, please?
Kirsten, can you read that for us, please?
Yes. When the modern scientist can pass more directly in his thoughts to the discussion and consideration of the etheric substratum which underlies the tangible, then and only then will he be entering the domain of causes, and even in this case, only those physical causes which underlie the grossly objective. He will not really have ascertained the vital impulses which produce being, yet a great step will have been made, for under the law of analogy, he will then be in a position to comprehend some of the major secrets of solar manifestation. For the planes of our solar system constitute, as we know, and as this treatise seeks to demonstrate, the 7 subplanes of the cosmic physical plane.
Thank you. Okay. Next, the Pythagoreans were often undeservedly criticized for promulgating the so-called doctrine of metempsychosis, or the transmigration of souls. This concept, as circulated among the uninitiated, was merely a blind, however, to conceal a sacred truth. Pythagoras thought that the soul undergoes a cycle of rebirths, and this cycle continues until the soul achieves purity and can be released from the cycle of reincarnation. Though this concept is attributed to Pythagoras, it is in fact as old as humanity itself, being reintroduced by enlightened teachers at the beginning of every root race. Next. Greek mystics believed that the spiritual nature of man descended into material existence from the Milky Way, the seat ground of souls, through one of 12 gates of the great zodiacal band. Among the ancients, Pythagoras seems to be unique in his teaching that the Milky Way is the seat ground of souls, though ancient Egyptians, Hindus, Chinese, and even Maori and Native American cultures viewed the Milky Way as a celestial river which guided souls into the afterlife. Verse 4 of stanza 3 in the first volume of The Secret Doctrine, HPB puts forward the radiant essence curdled and spread throughout the depths of space. From an astronomical point of view, this is easy of explanation. It is the Milky Way, the world stuff, or primordial matter in its first form. Though this passage is quoted in esoteric astrology, DK doesn't comment further on the Milky Way, except to say, quote, the mysterious band in the heavens, which we call the Milky Way, is closely connected with cosmic prana, or that cosmic vitality or nourishment, which vitalizes the solar etheric system. Makes sense that our parent galaxy would be the source of cosmic prana for our solar system. I see a hand?
Hey, Dale, please go ahead.
Just looking at these last pictures kind of reminds me that when we look up at the sky today, where most of us live, because there's so much light around, we don't see the stars really. And it's, you kind of wonder, like, when the ancients, when they were looking, they saw something different than what we actually see today. Just struck me, that's all.
Yeah, it was ever present, wasn't it? I'm lucky where I live. It's the light pollution is very, very low, so I can often go out and see what you see here in this picture. It's quite a presence, Thanks, Lindell. Okay, next. The spiritual nature was therefore said to incarnate in the form of the symbolic creature created by Magian stargazers to represent the various zodiacal constellations. Perhaps it'd be more accurate to say that the abstract qualities indicated by the glyphs representing the signs of the zodiac condition the incarnating jiva. And finally, if the spirit incarnated through the sign of Aries, it was said to be born in the body of a ram. If in Taurus, in the body of the celestial bull. So, like the ram, Aries types can be brave, determined, persistent, action-oriented initiators. And like the bull, Taurian types can be stubborn, reliable, sensual, patient, and strong. But of course, there are many other factors in addition to one's sun sign that must be considered when reading a birth chart in order to determine a person's nature. Okay. Thoughts or questions? You guys are awfully quiet today. Anybody have any thoughts? All right. And let's continue. Get a reader, please.
Okay, I'm going to ask Anne Veronica because I see all kinds of grief.
All human beings were thus symbolized by 12 mysterious creatures, through the natures of which they were able to incarnate into the material world. The theory of transmigration was not applicable to the visible material body of man, but rather to the invisible immaterial spirit wandering along the pathway of the stars and sequentially assuming in the course of evolution the forms of the sacred zodiacal animals. In the third book of the Mathesis of Julius Fimbicus Maternus appears the following extract concerning the position of the heavenly bodies at the time of the establishment of the inferior universe. According to Asclepius, therefore, and Anubis, to whom especially the divinity Mercury committed the secret of the astrological signs, the genitor of the world is as follows. They constitute the sun in the 15th part of Leo, the moon in the 15th part of Cancer, Saturn in the 15th part of Capricorn, Jupiter in the 15th part of Sagittarius, Mars in the 15th part of Scorpio, Venus in the 15th part of Libra, Mercury in the 15th part of Virgo, and the horoscope in the 15th part of Cancer. Conformably to this genitor, therefore, to these conditions of the stars and the testimonies which they adduce in confirmation of this genitor, they are of opinion that the destinies of men also are disposed in accordance with the above arrangements, as may be learned from the books of Asclepius, which is called Mavrogenesis, i.e. 10,000 or an innumerable multitude of genitors, in order that nothing in the several genitors of men may be found to be discordant with the above-mentioned genitors of the world. The 7 ages of men are under the control of the planets in the following order: infancy, the moon; childhood, Mercury; adolescence, Venus; maturity, the sun; middle age, Mars; advanced age, Jupiter; and discrepitude and dissolution, Saturn. Sorry, I did the best I could.
You did great. Nobody else here could have read that Greek, I don't think. Okay, so first of all human beings were thus symbolized by 12 mysterious creatures, to the nature of which they were able to incarnate into the material world. Actually, only 7 of the signs could be called creatures: the ram of Aries, the bull of Taurus, the crab of Cancer, the lion of Leo, the scorpion of Scorpio, the combination goat sea creature of Capricorn, and the fish of Pisces. Sagittarius is symbolized by both human and a horse, either conjoined or separate. 2 of the signs, Gemini and Virgo, are strictly human, and 1 sign, the Libran scales, is symbolized by an inanimate object. Next, the theory of transmigration was not applicable to the visible material body of man, but rather to the invisible immaterial spirit, wandering along the pathway of the stars and sequentially assuming in the course of evolution the forms of the sacred zodiacal animals. Well, it's very poetic, but we've learned from decay that the, quote, invisible immaterial spirit, or monad, has its place on the second subplane of the cosmic physical plane within the planetary scheme on which it incarnates. Only at the end of its sojourn in that scheme does it choose one of the 7 cosmic paths that eventually lead, quote unquote, along the pathway of the stars. Next. In the 3rd book of the Mythesis of Julius Firmicus Maternus appears the following extract concerning the positions of the heavenly bodies at the time of the establishment of the inferior universe. So Julius Firmicus Maternus is ancient astrology theory and practice. Looks to be, I thumbed through the PDF version, it looks to be a typical study of the usual astrological nomenclature. Its uniqueness comes from the fact that it was written between 334 and 337 AD and is one of the most, if not the most, complete surviving texts on Roman astrology. Next, according to Aesculapius, therefore, and Anubius, to whom especially the divinity Mercury committed the secrets of the astrological science. Okay, so Aesculapius, better known as Asclepius, is the Greek god of medicine and healing. He is the son of Apollo, the god of prophecy and healing, and the mortal woman Coronis, as shown here. Asclepius was taught the art of healing by the centaur Chiron. The rod of Asclepius, his staff with a single serpent coiled around it, remains a symbol of medicine and healing to this day. It is often confused with, and was originally almost certainly a variation of the caduceus, which has 2 serpents and is associated with Hermes, described here as the divine Mercuries. In both cases, the serpents represent wisdom. The, quote, secret of the astrological science came from the 42 Hermetic books. But it's worth noting that 6 of these books were medical and would have thus formed the basis of Asclepius's knowledge. Next, we have a description of the astrological chart called the geniture of the world, which shows the positions of the planets at a specific moment, considered to be the birth or creation of the world. But as mentioned before, this is a symbolic chart which places the rulers at the central point of their respective signs. Traditional rulers, all. Next, we have a description of the astrological, next. Where are we? We have just a few minutes left. I think we can go through this. Next, conformably to this geniture, therefore, to these conditions of the stars and the testimonies which they adduce in confirmation of this geniture, they are of the opinion that the destinies of men also are disposed in accordance with the above arrangement, as may be learnt from that book of Aesculapius, which is called 10,000 or an innumerable multitude of genitures, in order that nothing in the several genitures of genitures of men may be found to be discordant with the above mentioned geniture of the world. So what he's saying here is that men's initial astrological chart, also was in accordance with this birth geniture as it's described. So the Greek title given actually translates as, and Veronica correctly stated, myriagenesis, which suggests a focus on numerous astrological charts or genitures, but no copy of the book survives, though given the quote, it seems that Julius Firmicus Maternus must have had access to a copy in the 4th century when he was writing his book. At any rate, MPH here suggests that the arrangement of the planets shown in the geniture of the world also applies to the initial birth of every human being, thereby inextricably linking them to the destiny of the world. And this will be our last reading. Could we get a reader, please?
Okay, we do have a couple of comments. Anne Veronica, and I don't know if you read it or not, she says, myriagenesis is the Greek word myrio, the many or innumerable, and Genesis, born. And then Ben says that his pharmacy has a picture of Asclepius on the wall of the pickup desk.
Hey, that's great. Okay.
All right, reader, Yvonne, can you read for us, please?
Hi, everyone. But what was the knowledge on which the teaching of the mysteries was founded? It was no less than that of the ground and geniture of all things, the whole state, the rise, the workings, and the progress of all nature, together with the unity that pervades heaven and earth. A few years ago, this was proclaimed with great sound of trumpets as a new discovery, although so ancient an author as Homer speaks in the 8th book of the Iliad of the golden chain connecting heaven and earth, the golden chain of sympathy, the occult, all-pervading, all-uniting influence, called by a variety of names, such as anima mundi, the curious, philosophorum, Jacob's ladder, the vital magnetic series, and the magician's fire, etc.
Thank you. Okay, we are at the very end of this chapter. In terms of the text, we still have to do, next time we'll do the image at the center. So next we have a description. Wait a minute. Sorry, I didn't. Finally, the 7 ages of man are under the control of the planets in the following order: infancy, the moon; childhood, Mercury; adolescence, Venus; maturity, the sun; middle age, Mars; advanced age, Jupiter, and decrepitude and dissolution, Saturn. This linking of the planets with the stages in human life was introduced in Ptolemy's Tetrabiblios, then further developed in medieval times. But we don't have time today to read this, but this is literally the end of the text. Before moving on to the next chapter, we'll take a look at this illustration. This is from the original that appears in the middle of the page. Pretty fascinating. We'll really get into it. So yeah, until then, see if you have any chats worth mentioning here. Eschatology, theory. What else do we have? Yeah.
I think I got them all.
Yeah, good.
I just want to say that modern astrologers still use that lineup of the ages and the planets, especially when they look at children's charts, because it's very important to consider the moon for the infant, Mercury for the early childhood, and Venus for the adolescent. And you know, it's important, and it's still used today, this particular lineup.
I wonder if in predicting someone's death, if one uses a Saturn position in a progress chart, if that would be done.
Well, I think there's a bunch of different ways of considering it. The house, Pluto, Saturn, but I have to say that isn't something that I have ever delved too much into. But I know there's, 2020 hindsight is really good, but predicting is a little different.
A little different,
So.
yeah. I know astrologers who have looked back on someone's death and seen clear indications that the death of the death, but anyway, we will continue next time. Actually, we'll just start here. I think this is worth reading, so we'll look into this next time and then move on to this image, and that will finish this chapter. Okay, do you have any
dates? Yeah. Next up is Treatise on Cosmic Fire on the 10th of January. Then on the 9th, right. And then on the 19th of January will be the Secret Doctrine. And then our next STOAA will be on the 2nd of February.
Okay, that'll do it. Well, thank you all for attending. I much appreciate it. I enjoy the secret teachings and, using the ageless wisdom to explore different topics, not just theosophy. It's interesting to next time.
And there's one more comment here from Ariane. She says, the moon phase under which one is born is considered significant. Yes, that's absolutely true. There's so many things that are significant. And it's just a matter of finding, they all add depth to the chart. So, okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you, BL. Thank you, Francis.
Thank you all. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thanks for all.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.